Hello romance writers, it is Jenna Harte with Write With Heart, and today we're going to be talking about how to master show versus tell for a swoon-worthy romance. Now when it comes to writing, show versus tell is almost like a commandment. The problem is that many writers, particularly beginning writers, struggle with knowing the difference between show and tell. Let's start with what the difference between show and tell is. When we are showing with our writing, we are creating a visual impression. And when we are telling, we're just passing along information. And you might be wondering, why is showing so important over telling? The reason we recommend show over tell is because creating a picture or a movie in your reader's mind is what evokes emotion as they're reading. It's what pulls them into your story and connects them to your characters so that they care enough to read on. So let's talk about how you can show instead of tell. The first thing that you can do is focus on using the senses. You want to ask yourself, what does the thing that you want to convey look like? Or what does it smell like? Or what does it feel like? Or what does it sound like? Or what does it taste like? In other words, you want to use the senses to deliver the information you want the reader to know. For example, here is a telling sentence. Jane was cold from the snow. But there are other ways that we can convey that Jane is cold without telling the reader. One would be, Jane pulled her coat tighter around her. Another way that we could indicate that it's cold outside is that she inhaled the frigid, clean air. The other tip to show over tell would be to use strong verbs and active voice. Active verbs do a better job at evoking imagery for your reader than passive state of being to be verbs. Here's an example of a passive sentence. The date was planned by Bob. Now we can give this sentence a lot more oomph by using a stronger verb and making the sentence active. So instead of was planned, we're going to use planned. It's a stronger verb. Bob planned the date. Now note that passive voice isn't always wrong, and there are cases sometimes when you may want to use it. I actually have a video that talks about passive voice and the situations in which you might want to have that over active voice. But overall, active voice sentences tend to have more oomph and more imagery and connect with readers a whole lot more than passive sentences do. If you would like to watch that video on passive voice, I will have a link to it in the description below. The third thing that you could do to show over tell would be to use dialogue, but you want to be careful that you don't use it as an info dump. When your characters are speaking, that is an action, so already it's much more interesting. But what you need to avoid is having your characters have these very long monologues just to convey information. Here's an example. They had to get out of the car before it exploded. In this sentence, we're telling the reader what our characters need to do. Now here's that same information but told through dialogue. We have to get out of the car. It's going to explode. Another way to focus on show over tell is to not over-explain things. Over at Fiction University, Jenna Harte has an excellent article on red flags that will let you know that you're telling versus showing. I highly recommend it, and I will have a link to it in the description below. And one of the things that she points out in that article is that whenever you're explaining motivation, emotion, or description, you are telling. And she gives you words that can clue you in to explaining instead of showing. The culprits she shares include words like in, with, by, adverbs, and passive voice, which we just talked about. I highly recommend that you read the article, and again, I have it in the description below. She also points out, and I do recommend that you watch for these, are words that are reflective or descriptive. These are things like he noticed, or she realized, or he wondered. The action of the character should inform the reader about what your character is seeing or feeling or realizing or hearing. But this is particularly true if you are in deep point of view. Here's an example. Jane could see that her words hurt him. Now, instead of telling us that, your goal would be to explain, what is Jane seeing that makes her think that she has hurt him? Now, of course, there are all sorts of things that Jane could be seeing that lets her know that she hurt Joe's feelings. It could be facial expressions. It could be movements. Here's an example of what you might write instead. Joe turned away, not responding to her statement. But just like passive voice isn't always wrong, telling isn't always wrong either. There are times where all you want to do is deliver information to the reader to get to the next interesting bit. Whenever your character is going through mundane activities such as getting out of bed and ready for work, we don't need a play-by-play of that unless, of course, it's important to the plot or reveals something about the character. Another area that sometimes new authors get stuck in is greetings. That is another thing that you could skip over, just give the information instead of going through the hi, hello, how are you, how you doing, I feel great, thank you, how are you? In these cases, telling gets us quickly from something unimportant or mundane to the next bit of action. Now, I do have a video talking about when you should tell over showing, and I will have a link to that in the description below so you can check it out. So that's really a basic overview of how you can turn your telling sentences into more showing sentences. Now, if you'd like to see a text version of this video, you can do so over at writewithheart.com, and I will have a link directly to this post over there in the description below. Before I let you go, I want to let you know that we are getting ready to do our annual Preptober and Write-Vember challenge. If you are interested in writing a romance in a month and would like help during the month of October to prepare for that, as well as support and encouragement through the month of November to write it, I hope you will check out the challenge. It is free to join, so there's no reason why you shouldn't. And I will have a link where you can sign up below in the description. And I also want to remind you about Write with Heart, a free online community for romance authors. You can create a profile, access a growing library of tools and resources. You can blog, you can join groups, create groups. We have weekly tips and industry news. We have a weekly Zoom call for support and a whole lot more. I hope that you will stop by, check it out, and join us. Again, that's at writewithheart.com, and I will have a link to it in the description below. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do hope that you found this video helpful and that you will be back to see more great videos on writing romance. Until next time, this is Jenna Harte wishing you peace, love, and happily ever after.